Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and I don't know if you've noticed, but there was kind of a inauguration. I don't know, maybe it's my imagination, but for some people, it seems like the sun is shining brightly today, the birds are sweetly singing, and actually something very positive happened for the state of Idaho. And it has to do with the return to this long forgotten principle known as federalism. I've got the details coming up in just a few moments.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. Let's talk a little bit about Lava Ridge. This is a great example of how, well, federalism was being ignored. But before we go too far, let's talk about what federalism is. Now, if you're like most people, you probably grew up hearing that term federalism, and you thought, well, that must mean when the federal government steps in and says, here's how things are going to be done, right? Sounds like it would stand to reason, right? Okay, yeah, it's federalism. It has to do with the federal government. What we don't realize, though, is federalism is the concept that the federal government had some very specific enumerated powers that were the upper limits of its power, and everything else that pertained to our day-to-day governance was left to the states and to the people. You actually find this reflected in the Ninth and 10th Amendments in the Bill of Rights. Under federalism, basically the states have many and undefined powers because they most directly represent the people. The federal government, let's just say its powers were very few and very well defined. But we have seen a shift from this, and I'm not going to name any names here, Abraham Lincoln, but ever since the end of the war between the states, essentially states have become kind of like auxiliary offices for the federal government. In other words, whatever the federal government says, that's supreme. And, it's to the point where they almost don't even go through the motions anymore about, now, we care about what you think. It's no, we rule you, shut up and do what you're told. Lava Ridge was actually probably as good an example of this as I've seen it in my lifetime. And here's the good news. You ready for this? Let's bring this up here. This is the headline from KTVB. Trump signs legal order and suspends Lava Ridge wind project. Now, this was part of scores of executive orders that he signed yesterday. And, I'll give the man credit. He did not waste around. He didn't dither. Well, maybe we should check the wind first and see if it's safe to do this kind of thing. Nope. Trump signed the order that suspends the Lava Ridge wind project. And I'm going to go into some details here with the help of some of Idaho's congressional delegation because they seem very happy about this. Yes, the BLM talked to us about, we're going to put in this wind farm, and we want to make sure that we hear what people have to say. And yet, here's the crazy thing. When it came to what people had to say about this particular wind farm, mostly what they were saying is we don't want it. We don't need it and we don't want it here. So please don't force it on us. And, granted, this is just my take on it. I could be wrong, but the BLM listened very thoughtfully and said, okay, that's great. We're going to do it anyway, but, maybe they're throwing us a little bone, but we'll only do it with roughly a little more than half of the wind turbines that we had originally anticipated. But the bottom line is, it was going to be instituted whether the people of Southern Idaho care about it or not. And this is something that Trump, thankfully, stepped up and rectified with that executive order of his. So KTVB reports, in the order that he signed, it says this withdrawal temporarily prevents consideration in any area of the OCS for any new or renewed wind energy leasing for the purposes of generation of electricity or any other such use derived from the use of wind. This withdrawal does not apply to leasing related to any other purposes such as, but not limited to, oil, gas, minerals, and environmental conservation. Okay, so it's not just Lava Ridge. There's a lot of other stuff too, but it's important to see that in the pinch, it was nice to see the president actually came through for the people of Idaho. Senator Mike Crapo celebrated the decision in a news release saying President Trump demonstrated on his first day of office his commitment to listening to the valid concerns of Idahoans, Minidoka survivors and descendants, farmers, ranchers, and sportsmen. The Biden-Harris administration had made a willfully neglectful decision to begin the building of a massive wind energy farm despite widespread and vocal opposition from the local community who would have been most negatively impacted by this terrible project. He says Idahoans have a friend in President Trump who will listen to their sound judgment and expertise on local natural resources issues, and I thank him for his leadership. Now, he's not the only congressional leader from Idaho who wanted to weigh in on this. There was actually kind of a nice line of them, truth be told, of different people in leadership saying, yes, yes, yes. And I want to point out, I'm trying to think who has really the bragging rights here. Russ Fulcher, representative, says on his first day in office, President Trump successfully put a stop to the Lava Ridge Wind Project in Idaho. This disastrous windmill farm was neither accepted nor welcomed by Idahoans at any stage. He says, on behalf of countless Idahoans, thank you, Mr. President. I think Jim Risch probably gets a lot of the credit here, though. And it may just be his press release was better. Jim Risch, I said, don't do it. Idaho said, don't do it. Today, President Trump said, we won't do it. The Lava Ridge Wind Energy Project is no more. And he actually gets into, I took a promise to the Idahoans I wouldn't rest until that project was terminated. So he says, at long last, this is again from Jim Risch. This was published in the Gem State Chronicle. At long last, the calls from Idahoans to reject Lava Ridge have been answered. Finally, our nation has a leader who recognizes that people on the ground should have a say in how our natural resources are managed. On behalf of the people of Idaho, Senator Risch says, I sincerely thank President Donald Trump for putting a stake through the heart of Lava Ridge Wind Energy Project. By prioritizing this executive action on his first day in office, President Trump further cements his legacy as a leader in the revolution common sense that governs by the people and for the people. And I know that this is a place where some people may disagree, but really, if you have to choose between coming down on the side of should people be free to choose, what is acceptable or what isn't acceptable in their community in terms of like a wind turbine project or not. And for those who say, well, no, of course they shouldn't because clean energy and so forth. I wonder if you're letting ideology get in the way, or perhaps, fear about climate change. I'm going to sound like I'm being a Trump fanboy, but I want you to understand it's not just Trump. And to the extent that he screws up, I'm sure I'll be among many people who will call him out and say, you know what, you shouldn't do that. But it is so refreshing after the last 4 years of whatever that was that we had in the Oval Office, whoever the clack was behind the scenes that were running, Joe Biden. It's so good to just have, do I dare say it, adult leadership. And I'm not suggesting Trump can do no wrong. I'm just saying, but right off the bat, the executive orders he signed, one of them, in fact, I've got to show you this. One of the executive orders that he signed, I thought this was very important. Representative Clint Hostetler is like saying, stopping Lava Ridge and breaking from the World Health Organization, that's a double win. And that's something else that President Trump did yesterday. He actually signed an executive order that withdraws the U.S. from the World Health Organization. I know on the left, why would you want to do something like that? Why? That's terrible. But the amount of money that was being given to the World Health Organization by the U.S. versus what it was getting us, which was bad information, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, lock it all down. The World Health Organization did not do a very good job of handling the pandemic. In fact, most of their worst recommendations were the things that actually harmed people: masks, jabs, etc. So as far as, well, is it turning back the clock to the dark ages and the bubonic plague? No. But if we're going to be part of an organization, it should be something that actually represents the interests of Americans and not just Bill Gates and the Chinese Communist Party and whoever else seems to be pulling the strings at WHO. At any rate, I wish President Trump a very peaceful and productive, first few days in office. He's done a lot to roll back the damage done by Joe Biden, but there's still a lot to go. And a lot of this is going to be taking place at the state level. So we'll be keeping you up to speed on what's happening in terms of school choice and some of the other bills that are before the legislature. But let's take a little victory lap and celebrate. Lava Ridge, it appears, is stopped. And that's because at some level you had a president now who was willing to listen to the people in Idaho who were saying, we don't want this, and to be responsive. That's a win, right? Can we take that as a win? All right, we'll do it. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy.